Good morning, everybody. We are ready to read a chapter in our classic myths to read aloud. Remember, we are reading ancient Roman myths because we are studying ancient Rome. The myth that we're going to read today is Jason and the Golden Fleece. We are going to read parts 1 and part 2. It is a rather long one, so we're not going to read the whole thing in one sitting, but we are going to read part 1 and part 2. This story was, some people say that it was the first great quest or journey or search for something important in European literature, like the quest for the Holy Grail or the Don Quixote's quest to restore chivalry to the world, or Luke Skywalker's quest to prevent the takeover of the universe. This tale, Jason and the Golden Fleece, is a tale of a courageous hero, and he has to travel far from home, and he encounters numerous dangers before his determination and his goodness finally win the day. The tale that we have here, it only presents briefly to many of the monsters and the dangers that he faces along his journey to the land of the Golden Fleece. And it doesn't mention his companions by name. Some of them, though, are Hercules, Theseus, and Orpheus. Some of those you may know and you may have heard about him, but it does provide a brief and exciting introduction to one of the most famous adventure stories ever told, according to this book, Jason and the Golden Fleece, Part 1. Long ago, there lived in Greece a proud king who had a beautiful wife named Nephuli. Now, Nephuli means cloud. And there was something about this fair young queen that made one think of soft pink and gold edged clouds on a summer evening. The king and the queen had 2 children, a boy named Friscus and a girl named Helle, and they both brought such pleasure to their parents that the whole family lived each day and night in happiness. Only one thing marred their joy, and it was a strange thing indeed. In the hot summer days when the sky was cloudless and the air was dry and still, Nephuli would grow thin and pale, and then she would leave her home for a long time and come back only when the soft rain clouds were once again in the air. Now, some people said that the clouds were her sisters, and that when they left the sky, she had to travel far away with them, but no one really knew where Nephuli went or why. As you can imagine, there came a time when the king began to grow tired of his wife's long and mysterious absences. And there was as well a beautiful dark-eyed lady in town who encouraged his anger, for she had long been in love with the king, and she saw this as a chance to have him for herself. The lady's name was Ino, but there was precious little lady in her. For the truth, she was a witch with strange and magic powers. Before long, Ino had made the king forget all about Nephuli and had even talked him into marrying her, Ainu, instead. Now, Ainu hated Friscus and Helle because they were not her own children and because they were beautiful and good. And soon she began to mistreat them in terrible ways. She took their fine royal clothes and she made them dress in rags. She wouldn't allow them to live in the palace, and instead they had to go live with the shepherd's children in a tumble-down old cottage, and they had to work all day long guarding the shepherd's flocks on the hillside. But if the truth were known, Friscus and Helle were really not very unhappy, for they loved to frolic in the green fields all day, and besides, they did not care much what they ate or they wore. Their only grief was at the loss of their lovely young mother, Nephuli. Nephuli had now been gone a long time. The sky was cloudless day after day. Not a drop of rain fell. The fields became parched and dry, and all the crops withered away. There was not enough food for the people, and everywhere they were dying of hunger. The king at last sent messengers to the oracle in a distant city asking what he must do to bring back food and health to his people. But his wicked wife, Ainu, who was now the queen of the land, saw this as a chance to rid herself of the king's 2 children once and for all. And so she secretly bribed the messengers and told them that when they returned, they were to announce to that the oracle had said that Friskus and Heli must be killed before rain would once again fall upon the land. Now, these messengers were eager for the gold that the queen offered, and so they did just as they were told. In a few days, they came back to the king with their false report, and they announced to all of the nobles who were assembled at the palace that only when Friskus and Heli were dead would comfort and plenty come back to the people of the kingdom. The king was very sorrowful at this news, but he knew that he could not disobey the gods. And with Ainu's encouragement, he ordered that the sacrifice be carried out with all of the possible haste. Everything was prepared, and the children were brought from the hills to the courtyard of the palace and decked out in adorning things that they were about to be sacrificed. Here, wait a minute, I missed it. And decked out in white robes and flowers. There we go. As was a custom in those days for adorning things that were about to be sacrificed. Here they were to be tied and placed on top of a huge pile of logs that would soon become a raging bonfire. What a horrible way. What a horrible thing to do to your children. But just as they neared the spot where they were to be put to death, suddenly there came flying in from the heavens a golden fleeced ram, which the gods had sent in answer to Nephuli's prayer. Nephuli, you see, only seemed to be far away. In truth, she had been watching over her children all from above all the while. Quick as a flash, Fiscus sprang upon the ram's back with Hali behind him, and the next minute they were flying high above the courtyard, far beyond the reach of the astonished people below. Over land and sea flew the golden ram, faster and faster, every moment until Heli became so weary of the dizzy flight that she loosened her grip from the ram's golden fleece, and she fell down and down and down through the air until she splashed into the water of a narrow sea that they happened to be flying over at the time, and she was drowned. But Fiscus clung to the ram's back, and they flew on over the great black sea until they reached a country called Kalkis. There the ram glided gently to the ground, so tired and weary from this long and difficult journey that it soon died. Friscus stripped the beautiful golden fleece from the ram's back, and he hung it on an oak tree in a dark forest. And there it was guarded by a monstrous dragon that never slept, neither during the night nor during the day, so that nobody dared go near the fleece. And Fiscus remained in the land and married the king's daughter, and they lived happily together for many years until Friscus died. And all of this time, the wondrous golden fleece hung on the branch of the same oak tree, guarded by the same dragon. And for many years thereafter, the legend of the golden fleece spread to all parts of the world. No one was able to steal the fleece or to deceive the dragon who guarded it. Had it not been for the ram with the golden fleece, both Friscus and Heli would have been burned to a crisp on a bonfire. Although the word bonfire came into our language from the Scots and much later than the time of this classic, its tie to this tale comes from its original use of the bonfire, which was a fire that was used for burning the corpses. Bone, B-O-N-E, bone fire. It may also be interesting to know that the narrow sea which Heli was dropped was for centuries referred to as the Hellespont, meaning the Sea of Heli. Today, this strait, which is in the northwestern part of Turkey, is called Dardanelles. I may have said that wrong. How did the golden fleece come to be where it was? Yes, the ram with the golden fleece, flew in, sent by Nephuli to save her two children from being burnt on the bonfire. And so he carried the children. Although Heli did fall off, he carried Friscus to safety. And when the ram died from the long journey, Friscus took the fleece off of him and hung it on the tree, on a giant oak tree. Oh, that's where it was, on an oak tree. I just answered your question. All right, let's go ahead and move into Jason and the Golden Fleece Part 2. Long after Friscus had died, there lived a certain country, a king and a queen who had but one child, a boy named Jason. The king, whose name was Eson, was a good-natured man, but a rather weak king. He could not defend his kingdom, and after a while, his own brother, Jason's uncle, came to Eson's kingdom with a large army, and he drove the king Eson and his family out of the land and seized the throne for himself. Thereafter, Eson was forced to live far away in poverty and without his friends. Eson always wanted the very best for his son, however, and so he sent his boy Jason away to be educated by Chiron, who was thought to be the wisest person in the world. Chiron might be called only a half a person, for Chiron was a centaur. And while centaurs had heads and arms like those of men, and their bodies and legs were like those of horses, although centaurs were for the most part savage and monstrous creatures, Chiron was much different sort altogether. He was a scholar, and he was famed for knowing more about everything than anyone else in all of Greece. He knew about the stars and about which plants could cure diseases, and he was a great archer, and he could play the lyre and sing songs and tell stories better than any human in all of the land. And that is why many kings sent their sons to him to be educated. So little Jason went to the centaur's cave on the mountain top, and he spent his youth there learning to hunt and to fish and to use the sword and the spear, and what was better still, to be truthful and kind. But at last Jason grew to be a man, and then Chiron told him that his father, Aeson, was not just a friendless pauper, but he had once been a king. He explained to Jason how Aeson's throne had been taken from him, and he told the boy that his duty now lay in reclaiming the kingdom that was rightfully his father's own. When the time for parting came, Chiron went with Jason to the foot of the mountain and said, Forget not the lessons I taught you. Always speak and act the truth, and be kind to all who need your help. So Jason started on his journey. When he had gone some distance, he came to a stream that had been flooded by the spring rains. On the bank there stood an old woman looking for some way across. Mindful of what the centaur had told him, Jason spoke to her and offered to carry her across the swollen stream. The old lady gladly accepted the offer, and Jason lifted her upon his shoulders and entered the rushing river. The water dashed against him with great force, and he had to struggle with all of his might, and he was out of breath when he landed his companion safely on the other shore. But you can imagine Jason's surprise to see not the old woman that he had carried across, but a stately form of the goddess Juno, queen of all the immortals, standing before him. "Young man," said she, "you have a good and brave heart, and you shall not regret your kindness to an old woman." And in the next instant she vanished. When Jason recovered from his surprise and started to go on his way, he saw to his dismay that one of his sandals had been lost in the rushing water, and so he had to walk the rest of the way with only one shoe. He came at last to the palace of his father's brother, whose name was Peleus, and he was taken straight away to see the king. The king turned pale with fear at the sight of Jason, for an oracle had foretold that his kingdom would be taken from him by a youth wearing only one sandal. And one of Jason's feet, as you know, was bare. But the crafty king pretended to be very glad indeed to see his nephew. He bade him sit down and rest himself, and then he placed food and drink before him. While they were eating, the king told many stories of brave men who had lived long ago. "Ah, those were the days," he sighed, "but such heroes do not live in these times." "You are wrong," cried Jason. "There are many heroes waiting only for a chance to do great deeds." At this, the king laughed out loud. "You are a foolish lad," the king chided. "But it is time I find out who you are and why you have come to this kingdom." "I am Jason, son of the rightful king Æson," he replied, "and I have come to take back my father's kingdom." Then, then Peleus grew pale again, but he was cunning, and he leaped up and embraced the lad and made much of finding him after all of these years. And he said it was good for the kingdom to have a new ruler, for he himself was old and was tired of the responsibilities of being the king. "But that can never be," the king lamented, pretending to be sorrowful at the thought. "For there is a curse upon this kingdom, that it shall not be ruled by another until the golden fleece is brought here from the land at the end of the world." And then he told the story of Friscus and Helle and the golden fleece hanging in the woods, guarded by the dragon who never sleeps. When he finished, Jason sprang to his feet and he cried, "I will prove to you, O king, that the race of the heroes is not dead. I will bring you the golden fleece or die in the attempt." Now, who does this sound like? Yes, it sounds just like Perseus, doesn't it? And he was also tricked by the king. This, of course, was exactly what the king wanted to hear, for he knew there was very little chance of Jason ever returning from such a journey. But of course, he did not show how pleased he was. Jason then proceeded to construct a good, strong ship, which he called the Argo. And he sent out messengers all over Greece to his friends who had been schooled with him in the Centaur's cave. He warned them that there would be fighting and danger and even a dragon to kill. But they all came, for they were eager to help Jason regain his kingdom. They gathered by the shore and helped in fitting out the Argo for the voyage, and they called themselves the Argonauts. Now it happened that the great goddess Juno had sent to Jason a gift to show that she had not forgotten his promise to help him. It was a wondrous piece of sacred oak, carved into a figurehead and fitted into the prow of the Argo. And truly wondrous it was indeed. For the greatest wonder of all was the fact that this piece of wood could actually speak. Many a time during the long voyage, when Jason was in real danger and did not know what to do, he consulted this figurehead, and he always received good advice. But this is getting ahead of the story. When the Argo was finished and all of the provisions had been put aboard, the Argonauts waited for the tide and at last set sail. High atop his mountain home, old Chiron saw the swift chart depart with his best and brightest boys on board, and he waved his mighty arms and prayed that their courage and wisdom would bring them home safely once again. The word Argonaut means a sailor on the Argo. Its last syllable comes from the Greek word nautilus, which means sailor. Not only do the words astronaut and cosmonaut come from the Greek word, but so does the word nautical, which means having to do with the sea. So an astronaut, astros means star, so that would be a star sailor. And a cosmonaut, yeah, would be universe. Cosmos means universe, so it would be a universe sailor. The Greek word meaning ship was nous, provided the root for the modern word nausea, which is rather like seasickness one might experience on a ship. The Roman word for ship was similar to that of the Greek navis, and from that we get the common words such as navigate and navy. That's all the further that we're going to go right now. That's the end of part 2. And when we come back, we will go ahead and read part 3 next week. I know you guys want to continue, but we're not going to. What was a centaur? Do you remember from this chapter what was a centaur? Yeah, a centaur was a creature that had from the waist up was human, was a man, so it had the arms and the torso and the head of a man, but from the waist down, it was a horse or a goat or a hoofed animal, like that, a hoofed animal. Why does Jason journey back to Peleus, the king who is now the king? Why did he go there? Exactly. He was going to win back his kingdom for his father, Aias. Aias, was that his name? I think. What object does Jason seek? Yeah, he seeks the golden fleece. Why does he want the golden fleece? Yes, he is tricked by King Peleus, who told him that heroes no longer exist and that the kingdom is cursed and nobody else can rule the kingdom until the golden fleece is returned to the kingdom. So that is a lie. How is Jason equipped for his journey? Yep, he builds a ship, the Argo. He calls all of his friends. You're right, he contacts all of his friends, the Argonauts. What else? There's something really important about his boat. What's so important about his boat? His ship. Yes, there's a piece of wood in the front. It's a special piece of oak wood that was sent to him by Juno, and it goes on the front of his boat. And whenever he has any questions, he talks to this piece of wood, and the wood gives him sound advice, and it helps him in times of trouble. All right, that's the end of part 2 of Jason and The Golden Fleece. And when we come back next Friday, we will read part 3. You guys have a great week. Oh, it is Friday. Have a great week, a great weekend, and I will see you back on Monday. Bye bye.